popularity corresponds with a $2.2 billion TV rights deal the WNBA signed for 2026 that covers the next 11 years, which ESPN reports will increase the league's annual revenue by about $200 million a season. Yet, WNBA players say they're not being paid what they're owed. Right now, they get less than 10% of the league's total revenue, a strikingly slim margin when compared to other pro sports leagues in which athletes typically split revenues about 50-50.
The WNBA just signed a $2.2 billion TV deal for the next 11 years. But somehow the players are still being paid far less than they deserve. That's right. While the league celebrates record-breaking deals and a sudden influx of cash, the reality is that WNBA players currently receive less than 10% of the league's total revenue. Compare that to the NBA, where athletes typically get roughly half of all revenue. And the discrepancy becomes jaw-dropping. You'd think that with billions on the table, everyone in the league would be cashing checks big enough to match the hype. But the numbers tell a completely different story. The players aren't just underpaid. They're being asked to play in a league that has spent years pretending to thrive while barely staying afloat. For the past 6 months, media outlets have been endlessly hyping the WNBA, pointing to new TV deals, exciting new teams, and record-breaking attendance figures. On paper, it looks like the league has finally hit its stride. But here's the catch. The league itself hasn't generated a profit in years. The $2.2 billion deal with Disney, Amazon Prime, and NBC, along with the promise of 3 new teams, might look like a financial revolution, but the reality is that it's largely a handout propped up by the NBA. The collective bargaining agreement being negotiated after the 2025 season is supposed to reflect this growth. But CNBC's deep dive into the WNBA's business model shows that matching player pay to this influx of cash is far from guaranteed. The league has been running at a loss for years, and the supposed windfall from the TV deal doesn't change that fundamental problem. It only makes the surface look shinier, and let's be honest, the WNBA has become quite adept at spinning success stories that don't really exist. They point to increased ratings and rising attendance as if the league is suddenly the hottest thing in America. But all of this carefully polished messaging starts to unravel when you dig deeper. Caitlin Clark's recent injury was the perfect litmus test. For years, she has carried the league's viewership on her shoulders, and when she went down, the illusion of organic growth crumbled. The WNBA loves to talk about its rising popularity, but the data reveals a league that's entirely dependent on one player. Remove her, and ratings drop, attendance dips, and the so-called exploding interest evaporates. The more you look, the more it becomes clear that the league has been hiding the truth behind a carefully constructed facade. Here's where things get even more revealing. That $2.2 billion TV deal isn't really the result of market demand, it was forced. Adam Silver, the NBA commissioner, strong-armed networks into buying WNBA games as part of a bundle with NBA content. You wanted NBA games? Fine, but you also had to take WNBA games whether you liked it or not. That $200 million a year isn't money the league earned organically. It's a forced handout, a subsidy disguised as success. And yet, WNBA players look at that number and assume it's a golden ticket. Suddenly, salaries, perks, and revenue shares are expected to skyrocket to NBA levels. But here's the truth. The WNBA doesn't generate billions in profit like the NBA does. Trying to divide non-existent money is like asking for a slice of a pie that simply isn't there. And when you point this out, suddenly you're framed as the villain, accused of being anti-women. Even though it's just basic math. The numbers from Clark's injury season showed the dependency in stark terms. Games she played pulled massive audiences, while games without her plummeted. On ABC, her games consistently drew 2 million viewers. The rest of the league barely scraped over 1 million. On CBS, the Indiana team with Clark averaged 1.8 million viewers, while the rest of the WNBA barely hit 83,000, and it gets worse. 4 games on ESPN and ABC mysteriously vanished from reporting, conveniently buried. No intern mistakes. No accidents. These games likely tanked so badly that releasing the data would expose the league's manufactured narrative. Meanwhile, attendance numbers are equally fragile. Even strong markets like Minnesota are filling just half of their arenas, and sellouts often include free or discounted tickets. The WNBA loves to tout progress, but in reality, the growth is artificial, fragile, and entirely dependent on one player. Caitlin Clark isn't just a star, she's the league's lifeline. And without her, the WNBA's illusion of success crumbles. Even more striking is how this all ties back to player demands. Seeing the $2.2 billion deal, players have assumed it translates to bigger paychecks, private charters, and NBA-level perks. But none of this money comes from genuine demand, it's bundled. Forced and heavily subsidized by the NBA, fans aren't clamoring for more WNBA games. Networks aren't rushing to primetime doubleheaders. The reality is that the WNBA is a dependent operation, a league surviving on charity and influence. Yet the players' expectations ignore this reality, demanding a revenue split that simply cannot exist. They see the NBA as success and assume parity is their right, but the comparison is absurd. One league is profitable, thriving, and self-sustaining. The other is fragile, dependent, and artificially propped up. And that's before you factor in the inconsistent quality of the on-court product, where sloppy basketball and off-court drama generate more headlines than actual competition. So, what happens when Clark isn't playing? That question exposes the league's biggest weakness. Ratings sag, media coverage slows, and fan excitement dwindles. The league tries to spin this as balanced star power, but the truth is impossible to ignore. Without her, the WNBA is just another niche curiosity. Even politicians have jumped into the fray, sending letters demanding fair contracts, treating athletes like victims of oppression. But these players are in a league that literally wouldn't survive a month without NBA support. The WNBA's current moment of success is entirely artificial, and Clark's injury exposed the underlying truth. The ratings, the attendance, the hype, all of it collapses when the Golden Goose is sidelined. This isn't speculation. The numbers don't lie. The WNBA has consistently painted mediocrity as victory. 7 teams averaging 10,000 fans per game might sound impressive, but in arenas that seat twice that, it's barely half capacity. Television ratings touted as record-breaking barely compete with reruns of mid-tier cable reality shows. And when the league's strongest markets fail to pull full numbers, the illusion of growth is shattered. Yet the WNBA continues to spin, exaggerate, and hide inconvenient data. Caitlin Clark's impact exposes this truth. Without her, the league's relevance is minimal. The NBA subsidy, the forced TV deals, and the package deals with networks are propping up a league that would otherwise struggle to stay alive. All the glitz, the spin, and the claims of growth are exactly that, claims. The reality is fragile, dependent, and transparently manufactured. Looking ahead, sustainability is the league's biggest question. A single superstar cannot carry a league indefinitely. Eventually, Clark will age, get injured, or move on. Without a foundation of independent demand, consistent attendance, and real revenue growth, the WNBA's current hype is a ticking time bomb. Attendance is inconsistent, ratings are manipulated, and player demands are unrealistic. The league risks collapsing if the NBA decides the subsidy is no longer worth it. Meanwhile, the illusion of growth continues to mask a system that has never truly thrived on its own. The WNBA's golden era, if it exists, is entirely contingent on external support and one exceptional player. The house of cards is precarious, and every spin, PR campaign, and statistic is just another attempt to keep its standing dot at the end of the day. The WNBA isn't in crisis because of one injury or one player's absence. It's in crisis because that injury exposed the reality the league has been hiding for years. All the ratings hype, attendance numbers, and supposed growth are just smoke and mirrors. The WNBA is dependent, subsidized, and fragile. Players demanding NBA-level salaries are asking for something that mathematically can't exist. Without Caitlin Clark, the entire illusion unravels. And yet the league continues to parade this carefully crafted narrative, hoping fans never notice the gap between fantasy and reality. The truth is clear, the WNBA may have a shiny TV deal and a star player, but its survival and genuine success are anything but secure. Asterisk. WNBA players aren't just fighting for money, they've also drawn the attention of politicians, who've painted the league as a victim of systemic underpayment. Letters from the Democratic Women's Caucus demanded a fair collective bargaining agreement, treating athletes like they were risking their lives underground. But the truth is far less glamorous. These are professional athletes in a league that relies heavily on NBA subsidies. Politicians stepping in might sound supportive, but it also highlights how disconnected the conversation has become from reality. The league isn't struggling because of gender bias, it's struggling because it hasn't built a self-sustaining product. And yet, the players in the league lean on this political narrative to justify massive pay raises, framing it as a moral issue rather than the math problem it really is. The tension between perception and reality is getting harder and harder to hide. Asterisk looking to the future. The WNBA's reliance on Caitlin Clark raises a critical question. What happens when she isn't the league's headline story? One player should never carry an entire league. Yet Clark's presence has proven to be the difference between mediocre viewership and respectable numbers. The WNBA hasn't built a foundation of independent demand ratings or artificially